Welcome to True Echo, where real stories echo louder than fiction. Today, we bring you a gripping and emotional journey of betrayal, honor, and redemption, centered on a woman whose silence spoke louder than any accusation. A courtroom in chaos. A sniper in handcuffs. And then, an admiral walks in. What happens next will challenge everything you thought you knew about justice. A thick fog had settled over the sleepy outskirts of Coastal Harbor, Maine, the kind of morning mist that wrapped everything in silence. At the edge of town, a civilian shooting range sat tucked against the pine woods, its gravel paths damp with dew, its rows of paper targets limp in the sea air. Inside the modest control booth, Frank Sullivan, the grizzled range manager with over 2 decades of experience, leaned against the pane of safety glass, sipping his lukewarm coffee. He watched as a figure entered the range, someone he didn't recognize. She walked with a quiet confidence, wrapped in a simple gray windbreaker, worn jeans, and sneakers. A baseball cap was pulled low over her brow, and dark braids spilled down the sides of her face. She carried a black rifle case in one hand and a small duffel in the other. Frank's eyes narrowed. Something about her felt different. She didn't speak to anyone. Didn't even glance at the handful of white men chatting and loading their gear at the closer lanes. Instead, she moved to the farthest shooting lane, the one no one ever used. She opened her case and, with mechanical precision, began assembling her rifle. The fluidity of her movement struck Frank like a punch. No hesitation, no wasted energy. Just muscle memory. It wasn't just familiarity, this was mastery. Carl Jensen, one of the range's most vocal regulars, wandered up behind Frank, watching the same scene unfold. "You know her?" Carl asked, chewing on a toothpick. "No," Frank replied, setting down his coffee. "Then what's she doing here, with a rifle like that? That's not just some weekend plinker. Look at how she handles that scope." Frank didn't answer. He was already thinking the same thing. The woman took a breath, settled into position, and fired. The shot was barely audible, but the paper target at 300 yards quivered. "Bullseye." "Damn," Carl muttered, a trace of awe in his voice. "That's no hobbyist." More shots followed. Bullseye. 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 Each one as silent and surgical as the last. Frank glanced around and saw the other men beginning to notice. They weren't just watching now, they were whispering. Frowning. Uneasy. Then came the first comment. "Who let her on this range without checking her papers?" Another voice, "I don't like this." Black woman. Alone. Military-grade rifle. No ID. Frank felt the tension rise like steam from the pavement. He glanced back at the woman. She hadn't said a word. Her face was unreadable, her focus unbreakable. Still, the murmurs grew louder, more suspicious. Carl leaned in, lowering his voice. "Frank, you should do something. This doesn't feel right. We don't know who she is. Could be anyone. A threat, even." Frank hesitated. She hadn't broken any rules. Her weapon appeared legal. She wasn't bothering anyone. And yet. Carl's unease was contagious. Against his better judgment, Frank picked up his phone and quietly dialed the local police. "There's a woman here," he said softly. "At the range. She's making some unusual shots. No ID, no introduction. Something doesn't sit right. Maybe send someone to check it out." He hung up, the guilt already curling in his gut. Downrange, the woman, Alicia Harper, reloaded and fired again. Another perfect shot. She had heard the whispers. Felt the stares. But she didn't flinch. She'd lived in silence for too long to be rattled by suspicion. She had faced far worse than being watched. Alicia Harper had spent the last year in places these men couldn't pronounce, doing things they couldn't imagine, all in the name of a country that now looked at her like a threat. When the sirens wailed in the distance, she didn't run. She stood and began disassembling her rifle, piece by precise piece, as if nothing was happening. The police cruiser pulled up with a crunch of gravel. Two officers stepped out, Detective Marcus Wells and his young partner, Adam Reed. Both approached with careful, measured steps, hands near their belts. Frank met them halfway. "She's at the end lane. Quiet type. Didn't sign in. Shoots like hell, like she's Delta Force." Marcus raised a brow. "She give you trouble?" "No," Frank admitted. "But something's off." The detectives made their way to Alicia, who was now wiping down the last piece of her rifle before placing it in the case. Marcus cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need to see your ID and your firearms license." Alicia looked up, her eyes calm and unreadable. "I don't have them on me." "That's a problem," Marcus replied, frowning. "You understand the concern. A civilian range, unregistered shooter, and a high-powered rifle." "I understand," Alicia said quietly. Adam stepped forward, less measured. "You got a name?" "Alicia Harper." Marcus blinked. Something about that name tickled the edge of his memory, but he brushed it aside. "Ms. Harper, we're going to need you to come with us until we can verify your identity." She offered no resistance. Silently, she extended her wrists. Adam hesitated a second too long before pulling out the cuffs. The snap of cold steel echoed louder than the gunshots that came before. Every man on the range watched. None of them intervened. As Alicia was led past Frank, their eyes met. Hers held no anger, only disappointment. He looked away. In the back of the squad car, Marcus adjusted the rearview mirror to glance at Alicia. "Your name sounds ordinary enough," he said, "but nothing about this morning was ordinary." She didn't answer. "Strangers stand out in towns like this," he continued. "Especially strangers who shoot like snipers." Still, Alicia said nothing. She stared out the window as the town rolled by, its flags, its fences, its people who would never guess who she really was. Back at the station, the air grew colder. Suspicion turned to quiet tension. Marcus sat across from Alicia in the interrogation room, tapping his fingers on the metal table. "You ever live overseas, Ms. Harper?" She met his gaze. "I don't see how that's relevant." Marcus didn't flinch. "You're not like anyone I've seen walk into that range before. Skilled. Precise. Calm. You don't learn that in weekend classes. That's military-grade discipline." No response. "Who trained you?" he asked, leaning forward. Alicia didn't blink. "I trained myself." Marcus scowled. "You expect me to believe that?" The door opened then, and Police Chief John Daniels stepped in. A hardened man with a reputation for suspicion and a deep, conservative sense of order, Daniels looked at Alicia with undisguised mistrust. "Ms. Harper," he said, his voice low and tight, "you've put this town on edge. No ID. No answers. Expert marksmanship. What exactly are you hiding?" Alicia looked him dead in the eyes. "The truth." Daniels sneered. "Then it's time we dragged it out." And just like that, she was left in that room, alone again. A woman condemned by silence, judged by skin, and shackled not by the law, but by fear. But what none of them knew was that everything they thought about Alicia Harper was wrong. And tomorrow, the entire world would see just how wrong they had been. The morning fog hadn't yet lifted when Alicia Harper was marched into the courtroom in ankle restraints and a prison orange jumpsuit. The murmurs from the gallery were low, tense, like a storm brewing beneath stained glass windows. Locals packed the benches, some with quiet curiosity, others with thinly veiled contempt. In this small Maine town, the appearance of a black woman accused of being an unknown threat had stirred every buried prejudice and unspoken fear to the surface. Judge Eleanor Harmon, a woman known more for her rigid procedure than compassion, adjusted her glasses and glanced over her docket. She was already irritated. This was supposed to be a simple detainment hearing, an unlicensed individual at a civilian range refusing to identify herself. Open and shut. Except now, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI had both requested time before her. At the defense table, Alicia sat silently, hands folded. She looked straight ahead, neither defiant nor defeated. Calm. Unbreakable. But inside, she felt every insult, every presumption, and every cold stare pressing against her ribs like a vice. She had trained to survive war zones and foreign hostage camps, but this room felt far more suffocating. The doors creaked open. Two teams entered the courtroom, dark suits, stern faces, clipped strides. First came FBI Special Agent Robert Thomas, tall, tightly wound, exuding the confidence of someone who believed he was always the smartest in the room. He was flanked by two agents with briefcases and a guarded expression. Seconds later, from the opposite aisle, came Homeland Security's Samuel Griffin. Shorter, older, with silver hair and razor-sharp eyes that scanned everyone like threats. Unlike Thomas, Griffin wasn't there to prove anything, he was there to win. The judge frowned at the disruption. Agent Thomas, Agent Griffin, she said with a sigh, you both requested jurisdictional input on this detainment. Why? Thomas stepped forward. Your Honor, we believe the defendant may have connections to foreign extremist groups. Her refusal to identify herself and her advanced firearms proficiency raise significant red flags. The FBI is seeking temporary custody for a federal investigation. Griffin didn't wait for her response. Respectfully, Your Honor, Homeland Security has been tracking cases involving individuals with similar training slipping into the country under false identities. We believe Ms. Harper fits a high-risk profile. We request transfer to DHS custody. The courtroom buzzed. The words, extremist, and high risk, passed from mouth to mouth like wildfire. Several audience members turned toward Alicia, their expressions shifting from wary to hostile. Still, Alicia said nothing. Judge Harmon rubbed her temples, clearly annoyed. Agents, this is a detainment hearing, not a federal turf war. Unless you have proof of any crime. Agent Thomas interrupted, we have compelling circumstantial evidence that Ms. Harper has undergone military training overseas. Her ability to shoot with such accuracy. That's not a crime, Judge Harmon snapped. But it is suspicious, Griffin added sharply. Especially for someone who refuses to identify herself. In today's climate, such silence is often used as a shield for infiltration. Alicia's jaw clenched slightly. She had heard that tone before, in war zones, in diplomatic meetings, in classified briefings where men who had never fired a shot decided who lived or died based on suspicion and spreadsheets. And now it was happening again. Here. In her own country. Marcus Wells stood near the back of the courtroom, arms folded, eyes on Alicia. Everything inside him was twisted in knots. He hadn't expected this to blow up so publicly. All he wanted was clarification. Not a national security fiasco. But the moment Agent Thomas began tossing around the word operative, Marcus felt a chill. Had he made a mistake? No. He couldn't have. Could he? Judge Harmon was about to speak when the courtroom doors flew open with a powerful slam. All heads turned. A man strode in, tall, commanding, immaculate in a navy dress uniform that shimmered with medals and insignia. The room fell silent in waves. People rose, instinctively snapping to attention before they even understood why. The man's stride didn't falter as he made his way to the bench, followed by two other naval officers, one of whom clutched a thick sealed dossier marked, classified, in crimson. Judge Harmon's eyes widened. Admiral. The man stopped in front of her. Your Honor, I am Admiral William Parker, representing the United States Navy and the Department of Defense. I am here to put an immediate end to these proceedings. Griffin stepped forward, indignant. "Admiral, with all due respect." Parker cut him off with a single glance. "I'm not here to debate federal jurisdiction," Parker said. "I'm here to clarify a gross misunderstanding that has now become a national embarrassment." He turned to the naval officer beside him and took the sealed dossier. Placing it gently on the judge's desk, he gave her a nod. "These documents pertain to Operation Silent Harbor. Top-level clearance only. I suggest you read them now." The courtroom was breathless. Even Agent Thomas looked rattled. Judge Harmon hesitated, then broke the seal. She scanned the first few pages. Her face changed slowly, confusion melting into shock, then finally into something close to awe. She looked up at Alicia, her lips parting slightly. Then she stood. "Commander Alicia Harper," the judge said, her voice steady, "based on the classified documents submitted by Admiral Parker, all charges against you are hereby dismissed. This hearing is concluded." Gasps echoed through the gallery. Admiral Parker turned to Alicia and spoke with quiet authority. "Commander Harper, I apologize for the unnecessary hardship you've endured during this mission." The courtroom froze. The men who had called her suspicious. The officers who had handcuffed her. The agents who had accused her of extremism. The townspeople who had doubted her. All now sat in stunned silence, unable to reconcile their assumptions with the reality. Marcus Wells looked like the floor had been pulled out from under him. Alicia stood slowly, eyes steady, back straight. She said nothing, no gloating, no resentment. She didn't have to. The truth had already done all the talking. And the people who once saw her as a threat now had to live with the realization that she was the only reason they were safe at all. The buzz outside the courthouse didn't fade for hours. Local news vans lined the cobblestone streets like vultures. Residents gathered in hushed clusters, whispering about the black woman who had walked in as a nobody and left with the backing of the United States Navy. In living rooms and diners across town, the same question rippled through conversations like an aftershock: who is Commander Alicia Harper? Inside the building, the courtroom had cleared, but the emotional wreckage remained. Detective Marcus Wells stood at the far corner of the empty courtroom, numb. He stared at the bench where Alicia had sat just an hour earlier. The handcuffs. The suspicion. The accusations. Every moment of her unjust treatment played on repeat in his mind. He had been the first to question her. The one to give the go-ahead to bring her in. And he had done it not out of duty, but out of fear. Chief John Daniels approached him from behind, trying to mask the unease on his face. "We did what any good officers would do with limited information," he muttered. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't even turn around. Daniels stepped closer. "We couldn't have known she was who she is. We weren't told anything." "But we didn't ask," Marcus said softly. Daniels stiffened. "Excuse me?" Marcus turned to face him, eyes hard. "We didn't ask, Chief. We assumed. We saw a black woman with a rifle and let fear fill in the blanks." Daniels' jaw clenched, the discomfort showing for the first time. "Watch your tone, detective." "No," Marcus said flatly. "It's time someone did." Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, Admiral William Parker stood beside Alicia, shielding her from a throng of eager reporters. Though his face remained stoic, Alicia could feel his fury. Not at her, but at what had been done to her. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "I've been through worse," she replied. "I know," he said, voice low. "But you shouldn't have to go through this here. Not at home." Alicia exhaled slowly. "I knew the risk when I accepted the assignment. I just didn't expect the biggest obstacle to be my own people." Parker glanced sideways at her. "You're one of our best, Alicia. That dossier wasn't just to clear your name, it's a reminder to every agency watching this fiasco that their fear doesn't override your service." The black SUV arrived at the courthouse steps. As Alicia moved to enter, Parker placed a hand on her arm. "We'll debrief privately. Operation Silent Harbor isn't over. In fact, it just got more complicated." She nodded, her face calm. "What's next?" He looked around at the eyes that still watched them, some curious, some ashamed, some outright angry. "Now," he said. "Now, we make them watch you lead." Back inside, Marcus Wells paced the hallway before reaching a decision. He pushed through the courthouse doors, past the reporters, and walked straight up to Alicia before she entered the SUV. She turned, surprised by his presence, but showed no hostility. "Commander Harper," he began, standing tall but humbled. "I owe you a sincere apology. I let bias guide my judgment. I failed you. I failed my badge." Alicia studied him for a long moment. The silence stretched. Then she nodded slowly. "I accept your apology, Detective Wells. But change won't come from a few words outside a courthouse. You want to make it right? Do better. With the next person who looks like me." He swallowed hard and nodded. "I will. I promise." Alicia stepped into the vehicle, the door closing behind her with finality. Marcus watched the SUV pull away, the figure inside disappearing into the fog just as she had arrived. But something inside him shifted. He didn't know what the next chapter of his life would look like, but he knew this: it would be shaped by that woman, her courage, her dignity, and the way she'd exposed everything he hadn't wanted to see about himself. Back at the range the next day, Frank Sullivan wiped down a dusty bench with a trembling hand. The silence hung heavier than usual. The empty lane at the far end felt haunted. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. When Alicia stepped onto the gravel once more, wearing her uniform this time, navy blues, ribbons gleaming under the morning sun, Frank stood up so fast his stool toppled over. "Commander Harper," he stammered. She gave him a nod. "Mr. Sullivan. I just wanted to say," his voice cracked. "I was wrong. I saw you, and I didn't see a person. I saw a threat." Alicia walked up to him slowly. "Do you understand how dangerous that is?" Frank nodded miserably. "I do now. And if Admiral Parker hadn't come, I would have helped ruin your life," Frank said. "I'm ashamed." She looked at him, deeply, like she was studying his soul. Then she softened. "People make mistakes. What matters is what you do after." Frank's voice was barely a whisper. "Then please, let me do better." Alicia held out her hand. Frank took it. In that small gesture, decades of prejudice and fear began to dissolve. And Alicia Harper, once doubted and dismissed, now stood taller than anyone in that town, because her quiet resolve had done what no courtroom speech ever could. She had made them see. Weeks passed, but the echo of that courtroom showdown reverberated through the town of Coastal Harbor like an aftershock no one could ignore. Everywhere Alicia Harper's name came up, on news channels, in church sermons, around firehouse tables, and whispered in grocery store aisles, it was said with a mix of awe and unease. She had become a symbol. But not everyone was ready to accept what she stood for. Inside the NCIS Northeast Command Center, a low-lit, high-security hub tucked within a converted naval facility along the rocky coastline, Alicia moved with precision and purpose. Gone were the civilian clothes. Now she wore her uniform with unmistakable pride. The same people who had doubted her not long ago now addressed her as Commander. Still, she carried herself the same way, quietly, focused, never demanding the spotlight, only the mission. She was now leading the continuation of Operation Silent Harbor, a top-secret counterterrorism initiative targeting extremist cells planning attacks on key U.S. infrastructure. The operation had already neutralized one threat near the shipyards in Boston. Now, intelligence hinted at a second, larger cell working from somewhere just outside Coastal Harbor. Irony wasn't lost on Alicia. The same town that had labeled her a suspect was now her battlefield. And she wasn't returning alone. Wells is joining the team, Admiral Parker had informed her during the morning briefing. Alicia had raised a brow. Marcus Wells. The same detective who handcuffed me without evidence. Parker nodded. He asked for the reassignment himself. Said he wants to do better. Alicia didn't react immediately. She stared at the satellite images projected across the wall, grainy thermal patterns of vehicles entering an abandoned storage warehouse late at night. I've seen men say the right words before, she said softly. Doesn't always mean they mean them. Parker placed a firm hand on her shoulder. This one does. And maybe he needs to be in the trenches to prove it. Alicia didn't reply. Later that afternoon, Marcus Wells arrived at the base. He had traded his badge for an NCIS agent clearance and wore tactical black instead of blue. Still, the weight of his past mistake hung around him like armor that didn't quite fit. When he walked into the command room, he froze for a split second upon seeing her. Commander Alicia Harper stood at the head of the table, briefing a dozen agents and naval officers with confidence and clarity. She didn't flinch at his arrival. Didn't call him out. Instead, she finished her briefing, nodded once in his direction, and said, "You're on my support team now, Agent Wells. Welcome to Silent Harbor 2. Marcus exhaled, then stepped forward. It's an honor, Commander. I'm here to follow your lead. They didn't shake hands. Not yet. But the line had been drawn, a new chapter was beginning. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of intel gathering, drone footage review, and surveillance missions. Alicia moved like a general who had lived every angle of the battlefield before stepping on it. Her team came to trust her instantly. She asked precise questions, assigned roles with surgical clarity, and read every detail with quiet brilliance. Marcus watched her in awe. Not because she was a woman. Not because she was black. But because she was the kind of leader every agency desperately needed, flawless under pressure, yet deeply human. During one late-night recon, Alicia and Marcus sat alone in a surveillance van overlooking the suspected warehouse. Rain pattered against the roof, creating a steady hum. "Why did you really ask to join this mission?" Alicia asked suddenly, not turning away from the binoculars. Marcus hesitated, then spoke. "Because when I sat in that courtroom, watching you in handcuffs, hearing that Admiral speak your name with pride, I realized I had helped drag a hero through the mud." Alicia remained silent. "I've worn this badge for 17 years, Marcus continued. I thought I had a good moral compass. But you showed me how wrong I was. How fast fear turns into judgment. And how easy it is for people like me to ignore that." Alicia slowly turned to him. "People like you?" she echoed, voice level. He nodded. "I was raised to think I didn't see race. I believed in law and order. But that day I saw how much of that belief was a lie. Because the moment you refused to explain yourself, I didn't look for facts. I looked for confirmation of a fear I didn't even know I had." Alicia stared at him for a long moment. Then, softly, "You've done your homework." "I've done more than that," Marcus said. "I've changed. I don't expect you to forgive me yet. But I'll earn your trust, every day." There was a beat of silence. Then Alicia nodded. "Good," she said, eyes back on the warehouse. "Because tonight's mission is going to test all of us." At 0300 hours, the team moved. Using infrared imaging and ground sensors, they confirmed at least 7 hostiles inside the warehouse, loading what appeared to be crates of modified explosives into unmarked vans. A joint NCIS and Homeland Security team was positioned along the tree line. Alicia led the assault herself, flanked by Marcus and Agent Lee Wong, her second-in-command. As they approached the target, Alicia raised a fist, signaling for silence. Then she whispered into her comms, "Alpha Team, breach. Bravo Team, sweep left. Flashbangs deployed." The warehouse erupted in a storm of shouting, lights, and confusion. Inside, the suspects scrambled. One opened fire. Another attempted to flee through the back. Marcus tackled him cleanly, cuffing him with swift efficiency. Alicia moved with controlled precision, neutralizing a man attempting to ignite a detonation device. She pinned him down, disarmed the trigger, and called out, "All clear." 10 minutes later, 7 suspects were in custody. The vans were secured. Inside the crates, enough explosive material to cripple a major harbor. Back at the mobile command center, Alicia stood before the confiscated gear, quietly reviewing the aftermath. Marcus approached, helmet in hand. "We did it," he said. She turned to him, her face unreadable. "No," she said softly. "You did it." Marcus blinked. "Me? You stopped a man from escaping. You coordinated Bravo team. You followed orders, and your instincts. You didn't doubt the person giving them." There was a pause. Then Alicia extended her hand. And this time, Marcus took it. In that quiet grip, trust began to bloom, not built on apologies, but on action. "Welcome to the fight," Alicia said. Marcus smiled faintly. "I think I finally understand what justice really looks like." Outside the command center, the first rays of dawn lit up the coastline. And for the first time since the day she was handcuffed, Alicia Harper felt seen, not as a suspect, not as a stranger, but as exactly who she was. A protector. A commander. A leader born in silence, now roaring into history. 3 days after the successful raid, the small town of Coastal Harbor woke to something it hadn't seen in years, a military convoy pulling into the local civic center. Black SUVs, Navy-marked sedans, and armored transport vehicles rumbled through the streets, escorted by silent salutes from some and cold stares from others. Inside the civic building, high-ranking officials from the Department of Defense, NCIS, and Homeland Security gathered for a top-level debrief and awards presentation. At the center of it all stood Commander Alicia Harper. Her presence alone shifted the air, composed, upright, and surrounded by officers who had come to respect her not just for her rank, but for her sheer capability under pressure. Beside her stood Agent Marcus Wells, no longer the man who once doubted her but now her trusted ally in the field. Frank Sullivan, the shooting range manager, sat at the rear of the hall. He had been invited at Alicia's quiet request. When his name was called, he had initially refused. But something in him, a desire to witness redemption in real time, had pulled him from his worn leather recliner and out into the morning chill. From his seat, Frank watched as Admiral William Parker took the podium. "Today," Admiral Parker began, his voice cutting through the room like a tide rolling in, "we recognize not just valor in the field, but moral courage under fire, courage to act, to lead, and in some cases, to confront one's own biases and still choose the right thing." He turned toward Alicia. "Commander Harper, you not only led Operation Silent Harbor 2 with distinction, but you did so while carrying the invisible burden of prejudice, suspicion, and injustice." The room was silent. "You never once allowed bitterness to cloud your judgment. Instead, you transformed those moments of injustice into unmatched clarity, holding yourself, and this nation, to its highest ideals." He extended a velvet-lined box, opening it to reveal the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. "For exceptional service beyond the call of duty. And for reminding us all what it means to be an American." Alicia stepped forward. She accepted the medal, but didn't look at the press cameras, or even at Admiral Parker. She turned to the audience and met Frank's eyes. Then Marcus's. And finally, the eyes of the community that once feared her. "I didn't join the Navy for medals," Alicia said, her voice clear, calm. "I didn't take this mission for recognition. I did it because the safety of people, even those who don't trust me, still matters. That's what service is." The silence was thicker than before. This time, it wasn't rooted in tension. It was reverence. After the ceremony, people filed out slowly. Frank stayed in his seat until the hall was nearly empty. Then Alicia walked to him. "Frank," she said simply. He stood, removed his cap. "Commander. I asked them to invite you." He looked down. "I don't deserve to be in the same room." "Yes," Alicia said gently. "You do. Because you saw your mistake. And you chose to learn from it." His voice cracked. "I was afraid. I saw someone I didn't understand and let fear turn into suspicion. That's no excuse, but it's the truth." She nodded. "Fear's natural. But justice only happens when we don't let fear make our choices for us." Frank wiped his eyes. "You've changed me, Commander. Truly." "Then it was worth it," she replied. As they shook hands, flashbulbs popped in the distance, one last photo of a handshake that meant more than any medal. Later that week, Alicia and Marcus returned to the shooting range. It was Frank's idea. He had restored the far lane she once used, polishing the booth and hanging a new paper target in the distance. He met them with a shy grin. "Got something for you." Alicia raised a brow. "For me?" Frank led them to the booth. On the back wall, he had mounted a bronze plaque. "Lane 7, Commander Alicia Harper Memorial Lane. May every shot remind us to aim higher than judgment." Alicia stared at it. Marcus smiled, visibly moved. Frank cleared his throat awkwardly. "I figured, maybe others will read it. Think twice." She placed a hand on the wall beside the plaque. "It's perfect." That day, Alicia fired again, not to prove herself, not to silence doubt, but to remind everyone watching that skill, dedication, and character have no color, no label, and no justification required. Her first shot rang out, center of the target. Frank nodded quietly. "Still got it." Marcus turned to him. "She never lost it. We just didn't see it." Frank looked down. "Not anymore." And for the first time since Alicia had walked onto that range weeks earlier, the sound that followed wasn't the echo of gunfire, but the deep, honest quiet of respect finally earned. The quiet of the shooting range faded behind them as Alicia Harper and Marcus Wells climbed into the armored NCIS vehicle bound for headquarters. Operation Silent Harbor 2 wasn't over. Not yet. There was one final thread left dangling, one Alicia couldn't ignore. Satellite imagery had picked up a string of encrypted signals from a stretch of coastline 10 miles south of town. The signal pinged from an abandoned lighthouse, one shuttered for decades after a storm destroyed its interior. That same location now appeared to be a relay point for encrypted communications tied to the same network dismantled during the warehouse raid. But this one was different. It was personal. Alicia leaned back in her seat, reviewing the logs. The timestamps of the intercepted signals overlapped with the exact hours she had been in custody, still being accused, still in handcuffs. Whoever was behind the lighthouse transmissions had waited for her to be neutralized before making their move. They hadn't expected her to walk free. "They wanted you out of the way," Marcus said, reading her mind as he studied the data on the screen beside her. Alicia nodded. "And they didn't think anyone would ask questions if I disappeared under suspicion." Marcus's jaw tightened. "So this goes deeper than just weapons trafficking. Whoever's running this network didn't just want chaos. They wanted to silence the one person who could stop them." Alicia looked up at him. "And now we stop them together." The lighthouse loomed against the night sky like the spine of a broken beast. Its rusted silhouette towered over the rocks, windows shattered, railing twisted by time and storm. Alicia and Marcus approached silently, flanked by agents Wong and Diaz, their movements seamless in the moonlight. The entrance to the base of the lighthouse was sealed with a steel plate, freshly welded, too clean for an abandoned site. Inside, the air reeked of salt, oil, and electricity. Below the spiral staircase, a concealed floor hatch opened to a hidden room filled with servers, signal jammers, and crates marked in Cyrillic. Alicia signaled halt. She moved first, sweeping the room with her rifle. Behind a desk, a man in his 50s scrambled to draw a weapon, too slow. Marcus moved in, disarmed him, and pressed him against the wall. Alicia stepped forward. The man's name was Emil Drakov, a known foreign intelligence asset long believed to be off the grid. He had ties to multiple proxy groups targeting East Coast shipping lanes. And now, he was caught in the one place no one had ever looked, Coastal Harbor, Maine. Commander Harper, he spat with a bitter sneer. I always said America's biggest weakness was giving guns to its women. Alicia didn't flinch. And your biggest weakness? Underestimating them. She turned to Marcus. Secure him. Wipe the drives. And call Parker. By sunrise, the lighthouse had been cleared, its comms system seized and evidence logged. Alicia stood alone at the cliffs, overlooking the roiling ocean below. The wind caught her hair, her uniform, but not her thoughts. Marcus joined her, hands in his jacket. That was the last piece, wasn't it? Alicia nodded. The entire operation stemmed from this spot. The supply lines. The safe houses. The signal dead zones. It was all coordinated from here. Marcus exhaled. They tried to break you. Destroy your name. Frame you as the enemy. And you shut them down, on their turf. She turned to him. This was never about revenge. It was about making sure they can't do it to the next woman. The next officer. The next person judged before they're known. A long silence passed between them. Then Marcus said, I never believed someone could change my view of the world in such a short time. But you did. You didn't shout. You didn't beg. You just stood your ground. Alicia offered a faint smile. That's what snipers do. We wait. We breathe. We aim once. Marcus chuckled. And we never see it coming. Back at NCAS, Alicia stood before the mission board one last time. Red markers had turned green. All leads confirmed neutralized. The danger was over, for now. Admiral Parker entered the room quietly, holding a small case in his hand. He approached Alicia and opened it to reveal an insignia rarely awarded, the Presidential Unit Citation, reserved for extraordinary heroism in action against an armed enemy. This is for your entire team, he said. But we all know who carried the heaviest weight. Alicia took the case gently. I didn't do it alone. No, Parker agreed. But you did it when they wouldn't have believed anyone else. He paused. You've earned a break, Alicia. Time to rest. But Alicia shook her head. The mission may be done. But the work isn't. She walked to the large window overlooking the town. Her voice softened. They need to see that I'm still here. That I belong here. That this face doesn't disappear just because the job is done. Parker smiled. Then I hope they're ready. Because Commander Harper isn't going anywhere. And as the sun broke through the coastal fog, casting golden light over the naval base, Alicia Harper stood tall, no longer a silent guardian, but a visible force that even her harshest critics could no longer deny. 1 month later, Coastal Harbor was a different place. The same town that once viewed Alicia Harper with suspicion now watched her with quiet reverence. Not everyone spoke openly about what happened, but word had spread, across police departments, veterans' halls, neighborhood circles. The woman they had handcuffed, interrogated, and nearly ruined was now one of the highest decorated officers to ever set foot in their county. Still, Alicia never demanded praise. She kept to her routines. She trained, mentored junior agents, visited the shooting range once a week, and even stopped by the local high school to speak with the ROTC students about service, purpose, and resilience. Her calm presence had become something of a lighthouse in itself, steady, immovable, illuminating hard truths others had long ignored. But it was a quiet visit from someone unexpected that marked the true close of her journey. Frank Sullivan stood outside the NCIS gates, hat in hand, asking to speak with her. Alicia met him near the barracks, not in uniform, but in a simple gray sweatshirt and slacks, the same kind of outfit she wore the day everything began. Frank looked older somehow, wearier, but more awake. "Commander Harper," he began, voice shaking. "I know I already apologized. But that day at the range, it still eats at me." Alicia let him speak. "I judged you because I was scared," he said. "And what's worse, I called the police not because you were a threat, but because I was uncomfortable with someone like you being better than all of us." He looked up, guilt plain in his eyes. "You didn't just outshoot everyone at the range. You outclassed us. And instead of learning from it, we tried to bring you down. And I was the one who lit the match." Alicia didn't respond right away. The breeze stirred faintly around them, carrying the distant scent of the ocean. Then she said, "Do you know why I came back to the range after that day, Frank?" He shook his head. "Because I wanted them to see me. Not just as a shooter. Not just as a woman. Not just as black. But as someone who never gave up on the belief that people can change, even when they fail you." Frank lowered his head. "I don't know how to repay that." "You already have," she said gently. "You let the next girl at your range fire without fear." Frank's lip trembled. "There's a new young woman, Jasmine Cole. You were right about her. She's got it. And this time, I saw her for her potential. Not her skin." Alicia smiled faintly. "Then she's lucky to have you." Frank extended a small velvet box. "I had this made. I know it's nothing official. But it's from all of us, the ones who misjudged you, and now know better." Inside was a polished metal coin, engraved with an image of a sniper scope focused not on a target, but on a mirror. Around it read, "Clarity. Courage. Conscience." Alicia ran a thumb over the words. "Thank you," she said softly. Weeks later, a national interview aired, hosted by a well-respected journalist. The title, "Silent No More, Commander Alicia Harper's Story." For the first time, the public heard her speak about everything. From her early days in training, to the discrimination she'd faced both outside and within the military, to the courtroom, to the final raid at the lighthouse. Millions watched. And one line echoed most. "I don't want to be the exception. I want to be the new expectation." The next morning, letters poured in. Young girls. Retired veterans. Black families who had never seen someone who looked like them wear the uniform with such command and composure. Marcus Wells watched the broadcast from his small apartment, pride swelling in his chest. On his desk lay the mission folder marked Operation Silent Harbor 3, and across the top, Alicia Harper's name, listed again as commanding officer. He was ready. More than ever. Not just to follow, but to stand beside her. Back in Coastal Harbor, on a quiet Sunday morning, Alicia visited the range again. She took her place at Lane 7, set her target, and settled into position. A few yards away, Jasmine Cole watched her carefully, trying to mimic every movement. She had been training under Alicia's quiet mentorship for weeks now. Frank leaned on the window, watching them both. There was no fear in his eyes. Only respect. Alicia looked over at Jasmine, nodded once. "Take your shot," she said. Jasmine fired. Bullseye. Alicia smiled. "That's how you aim past judgment." Commander Alicia Harper's story reminds us that silence can be powerful, but what we choose to do after being silenced defines who we truly are. She didn't fight for recognition. She fought for the right to be seen for who she truly was, a protector. A patriot. A leader forged in silence but destined to inspire voices for generations to come. As Alicia once said, to change the system, we can't break it, we have to rebuild it from the inside, one decision at a time. If this story moved you, if you believe in standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to True Echo for more stories that reveal courage where it's least expected. And in the comments, tell us, have you ever misjudged someone, or been misjudged yourself? What did you learn from it? Thank you for watching. And thank you for listening.